My parents looked me in the eye and said, "Be independent." Translation: "We're not paying a dime for your college," but they wrote blank checks for my little sister tuition, housing, everything. So I left. No goodbye. No safety net. Just a suitcase and a promise to myself that I'd never beg for love again. 9 years later, I walk into my sister's wedding and my mom sneers loud enough for strangers to hear. Why is this missing piece here? The room tilts. My sister smirks like she won. And then her fiancé goes ghost white and snaps, "Shut up, this person is..." My name is Blaine Vaughn. I'm about to tell you what he saw and why my family's perfect picture started cracking right there. Before I do, can you say "listening" in the comments or tell me where you're watching from? Sometimes knowing someone's here makes it easier to say the parts that still hurt. If you've ever been the extra in your own family, consider subscribing so you don't have to carry it alone. Thank you. And now, here's my story. The ballroom was a sea of soft lighting, clinking glasses, and perfectly timed laughter. From the marble floors to the gold-trimmed ceilings, everything in that Austin hotel whispered luxury. I held Sarah's hand as we passed through the glass doors, and for a moment I thought I could enjoy the evening for what it was: someone else's big day, someone else's drama. Sarah, my wife, immediately got swept up in greetings. Half the guests here were tied to her medical network: surgeons, researchers, hospital administrators. I was just the +1, and I preferred it that way. I offered polite smiles, stood quietly beside her while she exchanged hugs and discussed clinical trials I couldn't pretend to follow. I've never been the kind of guy who fit neatly into these kinds of rooms. I excused myself after 10 minutes and headed toward the restroom, hoping to stretch the break just long enough for the cocktail hour to roll into something else. As I stepped into the hallway, the sounds of the party softened behind the ballroom doors. The hush was a relief, but the quiet didn't last. Why is this missing piece here? 5 words. That's all it took. I stopped mid-step. My lungs froze. I hadn't heard that voice in nearly a decade, but my body remembered it before my brain caught up. I turned slowly. There she stood, clad in deep plum satin and decades of disdain, my mother, Patrice Vaughn. Beside her was a young woman in a bridal robe, veil clipped back casually as if she owned the air around her. I couldn't see her face clearly yet, but her posture, the tilt of her chin, it hit me before I could deny it. Brielle. My little sister. The words had been loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear, and heads had started to turn. I felt them glancing over, confused, curious, pretending not to listen, but absolutely listening. I didn't say a word. My instinct was ironclad. Do not give them oxygen. Do not dignify it. I turned back toward the ballroom. Sarah would be wondering where I was. We could leave. I didn't need to cause a scene. I didn't need to be dragged into their theater again. But then I heard it, the sharp click of heels chasing after me. A hand clamped onto my wrist, digging in too tight for comfort. "Stand still," my mother hissed. Even leftovers should know better than to sneak into a high-class event. I turned, and for the first time in 9 years, I looked my mother in the eyes. They were colder than I remembered. And just behind her, the bride had stepped closer. Her face came into full view. Brielle. 9 years vanished in a blink, and I realized I wasn't just crashing a wedding. I was standing in the middle of my sister's. Brielle didn't waste a second. "This man isn't supposed to be here," she said to no one, and everyone, voice pitched high enough to cut through the music spilling faintly from the ballroom. He wasn't invited. I don't know how he got in. I stood still. My mother nodded like a judge confirming a sentence. "This is disgraceful. He's always found a way to ruin important moments." Guests began to murmur, just softly enough to pretend they weren't involved, but loud enough to sting. I could have explained. Could have told them that my name was on the guest list, that Sarah had the official invite, that I'd walked in through the same doors as everyone else. But none of that mattered. Not here. Not with them. They weren't really accusing me. They were performing. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to defend myself so they could play the injured party. So they could look around and say, "See how difficult he is, I didn't bite." Instead, I let my mind drift back to the last time I heard the phrase "missing piece." I was 17, senior year, sitting at the kitchen table in Maple Hollow, Ohio. My father, Dr. Leonard Vaughn, had just finished his usual speech about legacy and image and family duty. I'd asked if I could apply to college, just community college with some help on tuition. He'd leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and said, "You want us to pay for that?" "No. You want independence, Blaine. Then be independent." My mother didn't argue. She just sipped her coffee and muttered, "A broken cog in the machine only drags everything down." They were already planning Brielle's future tutor's dorm shopping application fees. I wasn't angry then. Just blank. Like someone had flipped the lights off inside me and told me to keep walking forward anyway. I got a part-time job at the hardware store 3 towns over, started saving. They still made me hand over part of my paycheck for the household. When I asked to move out, my father said, "You're not going anywhere. You'll die out there." I remember packing in secret. I remember forging my own path through trial and error, figuring out lease agreements, navigating paperwork, eating ramen 5 nights a week. I filed my own taxes before I could legally drink. There was one man who helped me, Ross Marlowe, a distant cousin of my father's but a decent guy. He helped me co-sign my first apartment. Said he'd always known something was off in that house. He never said more. He didn't need to. I recorded everything before I left. Not out of revenge. Out of survival. Audio clips, phone messages, every cruel line they thought I'd forget. I burned it all onto drives and stored them in places they couldn't reach. I didn't expect to use them. I just wanted to know I hadn't imagined it. That the pain had proof. When Brielle needed a quiet place to study, they told me I was being disruptive. They asked me to leave, and I did. That was the last time I saw any of them. Until now. I looked at her, Brielle. She was watching me like I was a stain she couldn't scrub out of her big day. That's when someone else stepped into the hallway. A man in a tailored charcoal suit, expression tight and wary. Brielle lit up the moment she saw him. "There you are," she said, linking her arm through his. "This guy somehow got in. Can you call security?" His eyes landed on me. And something changed. His jaw tensed. His shoulders stiffened. He looked like a man who had just stumbled into a room full of landmines. That's when I knew. This wasn't just some stranger. That was her fiancé. And he wasn't looking at me like I didn't belong. He was looking at me like he recognized exactly who I was, and didn't know what to do with it. Everett looked from me to Brielle, then to Patrice and Leonard, and back to me again. His jaw moved slightly as if he were chewing a thought. He stepped forward, lowering his voice just enough that it still carried, but not enough to make it a scene. "What's going on here?" Brielle jumped in like a contestant on a game show, buzzing in too early. He wasn't invited. He just showed up out of nowhere. "You know who he is, don't you?" "My brother, or technically my half-brother, depending on how much you believe in DNA." She laughed alone in her joke. My mother crossed her arms, nodding sagely. "We didn't want to ruin your day with all of this. He has a history of disrupting things. Brielle hasn't seen him in nearly a decade for a reason." Everett's eyes narrowed. My father finally spoke, voice even and performative. "We raised him, gave him everything through high school, but some people, well, they don't appreciate structure. They want to blame everyone else when things don't work out. It's sad, but we moved on." Brielle tilted her head toward Everett like she was trying to land the kill shot. "He's jealous, always has been. That's why he's here now, trying to stir up drama." I stood with both hands in my pockets, body still, my voice steady. "I'm not here for drama. My wife was invited. I came with her. That's it." Patrice snorted. "His wife, if you can believe it, is a Caldwell. That's the only reason he got in here at all. Married into money, clearly." Everett blinked. The name landed like a hook. My gaze stayed fixed on him. I could see the flash of recognition start to bloom. He was working backward, adding things up he hadn't realized were related. "I'd like to go back inside," I said, calm but firm. "This isn't the time or place for this. You're about to get married. Let's not turn your wedding into a courtroom." But Brielle wasn't done. "Are you not going to throw him out?" she snapped, tugging at Everett's arm. "He's embarrassing us in front of everyone." That's when it hit me. I'd seen Everett before. A few weeks ago in a fluorescent-lit hallway at St. Joseph's Medical Center, I sat with my son Milo, who was burning with fever and vomiting after an allergic reaction we hadn't seen coming. Sarah had been in surgery across town, unreachable. I was the one who rushed Milo in. The attending physician had been a tall man with a clipped tone and sharp eyes, the kind of doctor who talks more to the chart than to the parent. He'd recommended a high-dose steroid course immediately aggressive considering Milo's size and the symptoms. I'd pushed back. I remembered the irritation on the doctor's face when I asked for alternatives. He gave them reluctantly. That voice, that face. It had been Everett. He recognized me now. I could see it in the tightening around his mouth and the way his fingers flexed at his sides. He wasn't looking at me like an unwanted guest anymore. He was looking at me like a threat. Sarah appeared beside me, then slipping between the crowd like she knew exactly where I'd be. Her hand slid into mine without hesitation. Calm, grounded. That was her way. "Everything okay?" she asked. Everett paled. Brielle stepped back in, oblivious to the shift in energy. Finally, she said, eyes rolling toward Sarah, "Could you please tell your husband he's not supposed to be here?" Everett turned to her and something cracked in his voice when he said, "Shut up. This person is Blaine Vaughn." Everett finished louder now, and he's not just anyone. He's the co-founder of Ardent Systems, which is currently in a multi-year partnership with Caldwell Healthcare. The air thickened. Conversations around us quieted. The people near the check-in table turned to look. One of the wedding planners edged closer, pretending to adjust the floral arrangement, but clearly trying to assess if a scene was about to unfold. Brielle's mouth opened, then closed. Everett continued, voice harder now. "You just tried to humiliate someone tied directly to the system my department answers to. Are you even aware what that could mean?" Brielle blinked. "You're siding with him. I'm not siding with anyone," he said tightly. "I'm saying you need to stop making this about you when you don't know what you're doing." I took a breath. It was my move now, but I didn't want to play it like they expected. I wasn't here to flip tables. I wasn't here for revenge. I came here as a guest, I said. Not a ghost, not a story you tell to make yourselves look better. I came with my wife. That's all. I looked directly at my parents. You may not like that I'm here. You may not like who I became. But let's not pretend you didn't choose to shut that door 9 years ago. You don't get to slam it again today. Leonard stepped forward. You think some startup gives you moral ground? Don't kid yourself, Blaine. You took the easy way out. You married rich, and you're riding her coattails. Sarah didn't flinch. That's interesting, she said lightly. Because when Blaine and I met, he was already paying off his second degree while working full-time. I didn't even know his last name for the first 3 months. The confidence in her voice wasn't cold, it was composed. Professional. The way she spoke to hospital boards when reminding them who held the power of veto. He's not writing anything, she added. He built from scratch what most people inherit. There were a few nods around us now. Quiet ones. The kind that say I'm watching, and I see you. Everett shifted again. His suit looked tighter now, like it was starting to choke him. He cleared his throat. You said you came with Sarah, he said to me. You worked together. In a way, I replied. We co-manage our foundation's tech branch. Ardent Systems works with Caldwell on predictive analytics. We're also advising on compliance restructuring, especially around billing protocols. I didn't look at him directly as I said that last part. But I saw his jaw tighten. That wasn't just discomfort. That was fear. You know, we've had concerns about certain prescribing patterns, I said. The review teams flagged a few cases for internal audit. Nothing public. Yet. Brielle opened her mouth probably to jump in, but Sarah was faster. There's no need to turn this into anything bigger, she said. We're here to celebrate, not escalate. But we do have boundaries. And I don't think my husband deserves to be called missing at his own sister's wedding. The room didn't explode. It deflated, like a balloon pricked by a fine pin. The energy shifted, but no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. And then Everett said something that made my spine stiffen. "Milo's okay, right?" He tried to say it quietly, but not quiet enough. My head snapped toward him. He knew my son's name. He remembered. My silence was confirmation. "I was on rotation that day," he added quickly. ER was overloaded. You didn't recognize me," I said. "Or you did, but you didn't want to ask." He swallowed. "I recommended standard protocol. You recommended aggressive treatment for a 6-year-old with a mild reaction," I said evenly, and didn't ask if he had a medical history. The silence was colder now. Around us, the weight of too many unspoken truths began to press down. Sarah touched my arm lightly. "We can leave," she whispered. "No," I said. Brielle's voice broke the silence. "You're twisting everything," she snapped. "You're always doing this, making yourself the victim. You want to wreck my wedding for what? For attention?" I didn't respond. So she turned to the guests, her voice rising. "He's been like this since we were kids, always unstable. Our family we tried to help him, but some people just can't be helped." The phrase dropped like a flare. Unstable. Helped. They were planting a story. I saw it forming even as she spoke, the troubled brother, the long-absent son, the wild card who always ruins things. She wanted Everett to back her up, to call me unfit, to validate her version in front of witnesses. And if he did that, I'd either have to reveal what I had or walk away looking like exactly what they wanted me to be. Unhinged. Dangerous. The problem child back to burn the house down. They didn't know what I'd brought with me. But I knew now they were going to find out. There was a split second where I thought she might stop herself. Brielle's hand hovered, trembling just inches from Everett's phone. Her breathing had gone ragged, mascara threatening to streak down her carefully painted face. But her pride flared brighter than her reason, and in one sharp motion she snatched the phone out of Everett's hand. "Don't," Everett said, voice low but urgent. "Why are you doing this to me?" She snapped, her voice cracking. "You're supposed to be on my side." "I am." Everett answered, but it sounded more like a plea than a defense. "But I can't ignore what's right in front of me. If there's a lie, I need to know. Just trust me," Brielle said, gripping the phone tighter. That's when I knew she was losing control. I watched silently, letting the weight of the moment settle on everyone standing nearby. The crowd had thickened. Guests who moments ago were smiling for photos and sipping champagne were now turning to each other, whispering, shifting uncomfortably. Even the photographer had lowered her camera. Brielle looked around and saw the attention gathering like thunderclouds. "You're ruining everything," she said, but I wasn't sure who she meant anymore, me, Everett, or herself. Brielle, Everett said slower, now carefully. "Just answer the question. Where did you go to school? What program were you in? Who was your advisor?" There was no way out. He'd given her a way to clear this up publicly, simply, and all she had to do was speak the truth. "I don't owe anyone here a performance." She snapped, eyes darting toward our parents like they'd rescue her. "This is my wedding, not a trial." She tried to smile at him, but it came out crooked. "I told you everything before. Why are you doubting me now?" "You told me a story," Everett said. "But right now it feels like that's all it was. That was my moment." "I'm not here to destroy your day," I said calmly. "But if you're going to drag my name through the mud in front of strangers, then maybe we should talk about the truth. All of it." Everett turned to me, eyes sharp. "What truth?" I glanced at my parents. My mother's jaw was clenched so tightly her neck trembled. My father's hands were behind his back like he was at a board meeting. Neither said a word. "There's someone named Ross Marlowe," I said slowly. "Distant cousin. He helped me when I had no one. After I left Maple Hollow, he kept in touch. He told me some things. About what people were saying in town, about the clinic, about what Brielle's transcripts looked like, and didn't." My father's mouth twitched. "Ross was mistaken," my mother interjected quickly. Maybe I said meeting her eyes, but Ross was the kind of man who didn't say things he wasn't sure of. Everett frowned. What kind of things? I held his gaze. Things about Brielle taking a gap year she never mentioned, about her dropping courses she never made up, about how your fiancé might have a few creative interpretations of her academic timeline. Brielle snapped her head toward me. You're disgusting, she hissed. You'd ruin your own sister's wedding just to feel superior for once in your life. I didn't bring this up, I said evenly. You did. You dragged me into this, Brielle. You made it public. Everett exhaled through his nose and pulled his phone out again. There's a professor I know in admissions. I'm going to call. He should be able to confirm some of this. My mother stepped forward like a fuse had just been lit. No, she said. Everett, honey, this is all unnecessary. Let's just go inside. Let's forget all this drama. You don't need to. I need to. Everett cut in. Because I don't marry people I don't actually know. He pressed the phone to his ear. Brielle's eyes widened, then narrowed, and before anyone could react, she reached out and yanked the phone from his hand. It was so fast no one had time to stop her. Everett lunged for it. What the hell are you doing? You can't just call people to humiliate me, she shouted, backing away. This is my life too. You lied, he said, and now you're making it worse. I didn't lie, she said, breath short. I just didn't say everything. That's not a crime, no, I said quietly. But it might be the reason everything's about to fall apart. Brielle stared at me with something close to hatred, and then without a word she threw the phone to the marble floor and stomped on it. Once, twice. The crack of glass echoed through the air like a gunshot. Everyone froze. The silence after the phone shattered was thicker than any scream. A ring of guests surrounded us now, murmurs swelling into tension, phones starting to record. Somewhere near the ballroom entrance, a violinist had stopped playing mid-note. Brielle Everett said, his voice colder now. What the hell did you just do? She looked down at the remains of the phone like she couldn't believe her own feet had done that. I couldn't let you call, she whispered, then louder. I couldn't let you ruin this. I wasn't ruining anything, Everett said, stepping forward. I was trying to protect myself. And maybe you too. You think I'm a fraud, she shot back. You've already made up your mind. I think I don't know you at all, Everett said. And that terrifies me. Our parents rushed in. She's overwhelmed, my mother said, wrapping her arm around Brielle like she was shielding her from fire. This is a wedding, not the time for these outbursts. She needs rest, my father added, nodding toward the staff. Please escort this man out before more harm is done. They were doing what they always did, deflecting, rearranging the blame, painting me as the problem. I stayed rooted. I haven't done anything except respond to questions I didn't ask, I said, keeping my voice measured. And that phone, that wasn't mine. I'm asking you to leave, my father repeated louder this time, because the truth got a little too close, I asked, because she couldn't answer a basic question. You've been poisoning this family for years, my mother snapped. We gave you everything and you threw it away. Now you come here to take more. I haven't asked for anything, I said. Not a cent. Not a second chance. I came because my wife asked me to be by her side. And right on cue, Sarah appeared beside me, her face unreadable, her posture calm as stone. What's happening here? She asked Everett directly. He opened his mouth, but what came out wasn't about Brielle. I can't trust him, Everett said, pointing at me. He's not who he says he is. I've seen him before. My jaw tensed. Sarah narrowed her eyes. Where? At the hospital, Everett said. He came in with his kid, Milo. I remember. There was a disagreement over treatment. You diagnosed him without reviewing the full labs, I said, ice slipping into my tone. You refused standard protocols, Everett replied, sounding defensive. I questioned a decision that could have caused irreversible damage, I said. There's a difference. Now everyone was listening even closer. You shouldn't be here, Everett said. You're a liability. That's rich, I said, coming from someone with 3 pending complaints in the billing department. Everett flinched. What, my mother asked, eyes darting between us. I didn't say anything before I added because I didn't want to be the one who turned a family celebration into a scandal. But if we're talking liability, maybe you should check with the Caldwell Compliance Office. They've had some concerns about overbilling in certain departments. Names might sound familiar. That landed like a brick. The wedding planner appeared suddenly flanked by 2 hotel staff. "I'm sorry," she said gently but firmly. "We need to ask all parties to either return to the ballroom or step outside. This is beginning to disturb other guests." Everett looked at Brielle, then at me. "You did this," he said, voice low. "No," I said. "You all did." I just stopped pretending not to notice. Sarah turned to me. "We should go." "Yeah," I said. "We should." My parents were still trying to salvage something, speaking in hushed tones to the planner, trying to control the optics. I stepped close enough for them to hear one last thing before I walked out. "If you continue dragging my name through the mud, I won't just defend myself. I'll protect my family. And I have more than enough truth to do it." I didn't mention recordings. I didn't mention the files stored safely in 3 separate drives. But the look on my father's face said he remembered. He knew. As we walked away, Sarah's phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down at the screen, then showed it to me. It was a message from Caldwell Compliance. Everett Shaw's name had come up again. They were reopening an inquiry. I didn't smile, but I knew this wasn't over. It was just finally beginning. By the time we reached the car, the air outside the hotel felt almost too clean, too quiet. Like the moment after a firework has gone off when your ears are still ringing. I should have felt relief walking away from it all. Instead, my chest buzzed with tension I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. My hands were still clenched. Sarah slid into the driver's seat, her face unreadable, her phone already buzzing. I sat beside her, exhaling slowly. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then her screen lit up again. "Compliance," she said softly. "Caldwell Health," she answered. I listened. They didn't waste time. The voice on the other end confirmed what we both already suspected. Everett Shaw was under preliminary review for a pattern of overbilling and questionable diagnostic recommendations. Tonight's behavior might accelerate formal proceedings. They asked for a statement. I gave them everything. I had precise, factual, no dramatics. When it came to Milo, I chose every word like it was a scalpel. He pushed for inpatient treatment. It felt excessive, I said. We got a second opinion. It wasn't needed. The voice thanked me, promised discretion, promised follow-up. When the call ended, I thought that might be it. But Sarah's screen lit up again. This time, it was a message from someone in her department. Everett had been trying to spin a new version of events. According to his version, I was a bitter, estranged son who crashed a wedding and caused a scene. I stared out the windshield. There it was, the pivot. I could either let that version take root, or I could act. I don't want revenge, I said aloud. I want protection. Sarah didn't need to ask what I meant. I pulled out my phone, opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Audio files. Date-stamped. Labeled. I didn't send them all, just 2. Just enough. One clip of my mother scoffing at the idea of supporting my college plans. Another, my father saying I was only good for bringing in cash from my part-time job. I forwarded them directly to Caldwell's legal liaison, with a short note for context regarding the family dynamic referenced by Dr. Shaw. I hit send. It felt clean, controlled. Then another ping. Ross. I hadn't heard from him in months. He messaged only one line. "You should know Brielle broke down. Her in-laws are checking everything. The wedding's stalled." Of course it was. A house built on pretend degrees and curated Instagram captions wasn't going to survive scrutiny. A minute later, another message came, this time from a number I didn't recognize. "Your parents are contacting the hospital, saying they need to speak with you. Something about a family emergency." I laughed, a dry sound. Emergency, no. This was them losing grip on the narrative. Sarah glanced over. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "I just finally understand what they mean by self-sabotage." We drove in silence after that. But it was the kind of silence that doesn't ache. It was clarity. Every action had been deliberate, measured, and now I was no longer waiting for the next blow. I had chosen my ground. Back at the hotel, I packed slowly. Every fold of a shirt, every zipper felt like closing a chapter. That night, long after Sarah and Milo were asleep, I stared at the ceiling, waiting for guilt. It didn't come. I didn't feel like the villain. I felt like a father, like a husband, like someone who had finally stopped letting the past write his future. Caldwell Health's headquarters in Northern California looked like what my parents always wanted me to fear: glass steel systems they couldn't manipulate. No small-town favors. No knowing someone's cousin. Just protocol. They showed up the next morning. Security notified me they were in the lobby claiming emergency access to see their son. Apparently that alone was supposed to unlock doors. When it didn't, they became loud. Loud enough that corporate relations was notified. I agreed to meet, but on my terms. We met in a side conference room with a witness from HR present. Not legal, not a trap, just boundaries. My mother looked older, not sick, not fragile, just faded. My father looked annoyed at the inconvenience, as if I'd scheduled this meeting just to spite him. "Blaine," she began, voice-lined with sugar and smoke. "We didn't raise you to be cold. You didn't raise me to be anything," I said. "You trained me to disappear." They blinked. "We gave you everything," my father snapped, "except belief, except space, except the same shot you gave Brielle. She needed it, and I didn't." Silence. I took out a sealed envelope. Inside were transcripts from 2 voicemails and a summary of their financial cutoffs. I slid it across the table, not to blackmail, to remind. You don't get to call me out of nowhere and demand a seat back at the table, especially not while trying to ruin my name to cover your own mess. My mother started to tear up, but the performance was tired now, stale. "This isn't about revenge," I added. "It's about closure, for me, for my family." When I left that room, I didn't look back. 3 days later, the official notice came: Everett Shaw was suspended pending investigation. His billing history under review. His conduct during Milo's exam now part of an ethics inquiry. Brielle. Her wedding didn't happen. Her fiancé's family issued a statement requesting privacy as they reviewed newly surfaced discrepancies. Word traveled fast in Maple Hollow. Clients stopped coming to the Vaughn family clinic. No one said it was because of me, but they all knew. The clinic shut its doors within a month. At home, Milo got better. He smiled more, ate better, slept through the night. I took him to school every morning. I held his hand longer than I needed to. One night I told him a story about a boy who left home with empty pockets but managed to build something better. Not because he had to prove anything, just because he knew he could. He asked me if the boy ever went back. I shook my head. He didn't need to. When I turned off his lamp, I looked around the quiet house. The hallway light glowed warm. Sarah was in the kitchen humming something under her breath. I wasn't the missing piece anymore. I had become the frame, the one that holds everything else together. Some stories don't end with fireworks. They end in silence, in choices made behind closed doors, in boundaries drawn without an audience. That's what this story became: not a revenge plot, not a courtroom victory, not a dramatic takedown, just a quiet refusal to keep bleeding for people who only know how to cut. For years I lived with the belief that I was the problem, that I was defective, broken, unworthy. My parents told me that. My sister reinforced it. Even the town I grew up in, with its polite smiles and careful avoidance, taught me how to vanish into the wallpaper. But survival does something strange to a man. It teaches you how to become your own witness, and eventually, your own defense. When I walked into that wedding in Austin, I didn't know I was walking into a test. A test of who I used to be versus who I've become. And maybe that's what life is: a series of rooms we keep re-entering until we realize we don't belong there anymore. That day wasn't about confrontation. It was about liberation. Not from them, but from the lies they planted in me. I don't believe in perfect endings. I believe in earned peace. In sitting across the table from your past and saying no more. In choosing to protect the people who see you, not the version your family tried to sculpt, not the echo of who you were when you were desperate for love, but you and all your flawed, grown, raw self. I still don't have the apology I deserved. I probably never will. And I've made peace with that. Because I'm no longer chasing apologies. I'm building a life where I don't need them. I have a partner who sees through the noise. A child whose laughter is louder than all the shame I used to carry. A home where nothing is earned by silence or submission. That is my justice. That is my reward. And to anyone out there who's ever been told they're the missing piece, let me tell you this, you were never missing. You were misplaced, misunderstood, but not missing. You were just waiting to come home to yourself. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of a version of yourself you've buried or a fight you've been too exhausted to pick, then I hope you stay. There are more stories like this, more truths to unpack, more paths to reclaim. So if you want to walk this journey with me, if you want to keep peeling back the layers and finding the kind of honesty that doesn't need to scream to be heard, subscribe. Follow along. There's more to come. And I promise whatever story we explore next, we'll tell it the way it deserves to be told. Your truth is not too loud. Your pain is not too much. And you are not alone. Let's keep going. Subscribe now. And if you're still reading this, still with me after all these pages, all these wounds peeled back and truths laid bare, then maybe you see yourself here too. Maybe you've been the outsider at your own family table. Maybe you've carried the weight of a childhood that never let you breathe. Maybe you've had to start from nothing, not just once, but over and over again, because the people who should have loved you only knew how to rewrite the story with themselves as the victims. I see you. And I hope more than anything that this story reminded you of one thing: you don't owe anyone your silence just because they call themselves family. You don't have to keep performing loyalty for people who never earned it. You get to draw a line. You get to say enough. You get to choose your own peace, your own people, your own path forward. This isn't just a story about one broken family. It's a story about reclaiming voice, memory, and dignity. About no longer shrinking to fit the narrative someone else wrote for you.